like to give is not my only goal. This show tonight is coming from my soul. It's far away in a distant land, in places unknown to me. Yet people, they laugh the same. The young ones all play their games. We really aren't so many worlds apart. A simple smile can warm two human hearts.
Somehow, seeing the Great Wall of China stretching before you and realizing that it covers 3,000 miles gives one a sense of awe and humility. As Brigham Young University's 42 international folk dancers and their leaders stood on the wall in May 1981, they were impressed with its antiquity, as well as the significance of climbing one of the two man-made objects visible to our astronauts from the moon. It had only taken a few hours for the folk dancers to realize that loving the Chinese people would be easy. The hearts and thoughts of these young Americans would never be the same. Their dances were as intricate as the fiber of their message, that men and women of goodwill can bridge tradition and move beyond barriers of ideology. For Dr. David Chun of the BYU Hawaii campus, standing on the Great Wall was especially poignant. He had fled China for his life 30 years before. During the time when relations between China and the United States were practically non-existent, he had been promised by an apostle of the Lord that someday he would return to meet the members of his family. Now, as cultural and language expert for the folk dance tour, Dr. Chun stood on the long wall with that very servant of the Lord. And he and Elder Boyd K. Packer remembered the promise that they would someday be together within these borders. Although some of the student performers were veterans of several of the 17 summer tours that the international folk dancers have taken to Western and Eastern Europe, they still found it took some adjustment to eat pickled duck's feet, fish lips soup, or thousand-year eggs. Peking is noted for numerous cultural attractions. The Temple of Heaven, the Summer Palace, Tiananmen Square, where hundreds of Chinese visitors made the folk dancers as much of an attraction as Mao's tomb. Benefiting from the appearance of BYU's two young ambassador troops which had preceded them, the folk dancers gave their first performance in the prestigious Red Tower Theater. Attended by numerous high-ranking government and party officials, the performance was well received. The Great American West was featured, as well as colorful dances of Eastern Europe. The stately Polish Krakowiak, the flowing Satsumari Karikazo, the excitement of Israel in the joy of youth, and the Czechoslovakian Vartak. A showstopper was always the Chinese ribbon dance, which one reviewer said combined Chinese tradition with American enthusiasm and was very entertaining. Songs such as Mo Li Hua and Small World, sung in Chinese, always brought a warm response. One of the most popular elements of the show was the fact that 11 performers spoke in Mandarin, explaining the dances and furthering the brotherhood theme of the show.
黑美国有牛郎风情西部文化，牛郎织梦，元前舞，四方舞。
While in Peking, a crew from Central China Television accompanied the dancers everywhere they went, filming a documentary illustrating the friendship between the young Americans and the Chinese. Another highlight of the group's visit in Peking was a stroll through the Forbidden City. The group had special reverence for the Pavilion of 1,000 Springs, from which Elder James E. Faust had rededicated China on July 4th, 1979. Here the students paused and sang hymns. And remembered it was near this same spot where President McKay originally dedicated China in 1921. When people on the streets saw the group members dressed in their smart tour outfits, they often mentioned having seen the previous groups on television. A number of comments from officials and students illustrated the fact that Brigham Young University is one of the best-known American universities in China. Nanking, or as the Chinese say it, Nanjing, was an interesting change of pace for the young performers. Not only was this the first group of American folk dancers admitted to the People's Republic of China since the Revolution, but also their performance was the first by a BYU group to be televised live. These broadcasts were eventually filmed in 3 provinces, estimated audience 135 million. The students were in awe of the ancient astronomical instruments on the mountain of purple gold, the Nanking Bridge, which cut crossing time of the Yangtze River from hours to minutes, and the beautiful Sun Yat-sen Memorial. At a Nanking University, the dancers visited an advanced English class. Each American was given a Chinese friend for a tour of campus. Conversations often turned to matters of the heart, and several copies of the Book of Mormon were shared upon request. Cutting through the countryside by train provided a fascinating view of Chinese life. Everywhere, people were working in fields or fishing in streams, and children were seen playing in yards. The British flavor of Shanghai struck a familiar note in the young Yanks. It was immediately evident that many of Shanghai's 11 million people dressed in brighter clothes than seen elsewhere. The Bund is one of those places in the world where you stroll along and soak in never-to-be-forgotten atmosphere. Barges, sailboats, and ships move about the harbor, and the panoply of Chinese life spreads before you. Shanghai also took on special meaning as a Sabbath dawned and the folk dancers, band members, and leaders took occasion to spiritually refresh themselves. Elder and Sister Packer, President and Sister Holland were featured speakers in the full complement of church meetings held that day. Of significance was the attendance of 8 Chinese at the meetings. They were friends made during previous performance tours, friends who have a special feeling for the church and who are brave enough to meet under these special circumstances. A command performance of the Shanghai Song and Dance Troupe was of special interest. BYU has had a relationship with this group since the first visit in 1979. They were so impressed with the folk dancers' concert that 2 lead dancers were dispatched to follow the group and learn some of the dances. As the folk dancers moved through the cities and countryside, they felt a deep responsibility. It was evident that they were on stage everywhere they went. What they said and did was noticed. They had studied and prepared to avoid any situation that might injure the image of their country, their church, or their university. Hangzhou lived up to its reputation as the most beautiful city in China. West Lake was spectacular. The Buddhist monastery was a reminder that some practice of religion is again allowed in China. And the botanical gardens brought a reverence for the art of Oriental cultivation. Elder Packer even painted a pheasant for an artist in the rose gardens. A visit to a silk factory brought special appreciation for the famed Chinese fabrics and the workers who produced them. Among the educational experience in this Hangzhou area was a visit to an agricultural commune consisting of 6,000 families, 40 trucks, 110 tractors, and 23,000 oxen. The group visited homes of the workers, their fields, and their hospital. But it was their children who stole the group's hearts. As in other cities, the 5,000-seat auditorium in Canton or Guangzhou was sold out for 3 performances. Here the audiences were especially enthusiastic. A teacher of English told him that this was the greatest response he had heard from the Chinese people during his entire 2-year stint in the country. The Spanish flamenco was always one of the best received numbers. The folk dancers were impressed that even though China is an ancient country, modern China is like a little child. As she awakens from her sleep of isolation, she seems more eager than ever to embrace virtuous offerings from others. As the group traveled from city to city and performance to performance, the words of the famous Chinese philosopher took on added meaning for the BYU troupe. Confucius wrote, "To find enjoyment in the discriminating study of ceremonies and music, to find enjoyment in speaking of the goodness of others, to find enjoyment in having many worthy friends, these are advantageous." Perhaps this was best illustrated by the group's visit to Fengchong Commune, where 5- and 6-year-olds performed. When the folk dancers sang for the children, Rob Lydiard knelt down and put 2 little ducks on his knee. It was a beautiful moment for everyone, and as Sister Holland commented, it reminded all of us that, except ye become as a little child, ye cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. As the BYU folk dancers neared the end of their journey, they realized the displays of love and talent they had brought to China had been exchanged for friendship and understanding. The closeness they felt for the people of this land had become so strong it was difficult to say goodbye. Symbolic of the close relationships that had been formed was the bond between the group and the guides. Miss Lin Jingjing and Mr. Zheng Zhang, or as President Holland named him, the General, would never be the same. The group left China with a strengthened belief that, despite political differences or geographical boundaries, all are children of God. They know that China, like a young child, is awake now, carefully watching and learning, cautious to ensure that it will import only those ideas and ideals that are virtuous and of good report. The folk dancers feel they have helped influence that choice. Perhaps the most valuable lesson learned is that the Americans and the Chinese are not so many worlds apart.
We really aren't so many worlds apart. A simple smile can warm 2 human hearts. I can't stay long, I must be on my way. For other towns and people I will play. Though miles apart we lead our separate lives, may brotherhood and peace in us survive. It's far away in a distant land, in places unknown to me, yet people, they laughs the same. The young ones all play their games. We really aren't so many worlds apart. A simple smile can warm two human hearts. We really aren't so many worlds apart. A simple smile can warm two human hearts.